They say moving to the suburbs means you're finally safe. Clean sidewalks, quiet nights, and neighbors who smile like everything's fine. But peace isn't always what it seems, especially when it's enforced by people who hide behind rules and regulations like armor. I came to Silver Hollow to escape the ghosts of my past, to find quiet after decades of chasing men who burned lives down for profit. What I found was a different kind of criminal one who didn't need guns or getaway cars, just a clipboard, a title, and a neighborhood too afraid to say no. But what Vivian Sloan didn't know was that she'd picked the one man who'd spent his life tearing down empires just like hers. And this time, I wasn't coming to knock politely. When Ethan Rowe pulled into the gravel driveway of his late father's cabin in Silver Hollow, Arizona, he wasn't chasing peace. He was escaping ghosts. The retired U.S. Marshal had spent 20 years tracking fugitives across deserts, cities, and foreign borders. But no cartel, no warlord, no serial predator had haunted him like the memory of a blown case that cost an innocent life. The cabin, surrounded by mesquite trees and a view of the copper-tinted lake, had always been his father's refuge. And now, it was Ethan's too. Just him, the open sky, and silence. At least that was the plan. Day one felt promising. The sun was clean, the air dry, and his neighbors were, well, polite. A woman named Ellie from across the street waved from her porch. A teen on a bike nodded and didn't say much. Nothing like the chaos of D.C. or the red tape of field offices. Ethan started unpacking boxes, stacking dusty photo albums and half-broken furniture in the foyer, when a silver Mercedes rolled up. She stepped out like she owned the ground beneath her heels. "Mr. Rowe?" she said, smiling with teeth that didn't match her eyes. "Vivian Sloan, president of the Silver Hollow Homeowners Association." She extended a folder thick, stapled, and glossy. "Welcome packet. You'll find the covenant agreement inside, plus our guidelines and community fee schedule. We just completed an irrigation redesign, so this month's contribution is slightly above standard. $6,820 prorated." Ethan blinked. "I didn't agree to join an HOA." Vivian's smile didn't flinch. "All residents are expected to comply. It's how we keep the community safe, beautiful, and harmonious. You wouldn't want to be an outlier, Mr. Rowe. Outliers disrupt." He flipped through the first few pages. Landscaping restrictions, color palettes, noise regulations, pet limits. "This reads like a military handbook." Her tone dropped half a register. "People who value peace tend to appreciate order." "I'm not signing anything," he said, handing the folder back. "I didn't move here to join a regime." Vivian took the folder, still smiling, but her eyes had cooled. "Well," she said, adjusting her blazer, "you'll find that Silver Hollow isn't very welcoming to non-participants." She turned, walked back to her car, and drove off without another word. That night, Ethan's water pressure dropped to a trickle. The next morning, his garbage wasn't collected. On the third day, a neon orange violation notice was taped to his front door. Reason: mailbox design non-compliance. Max height, 42 inches. Yours, 46. By day 5, the same neighbors who smiled had started crossing the street to avoid eye contact. Ethan didn't panic. He logged every incident, dated every notice, mounted small cameras, some obvious, some discreet. He knew patterns. He knew control tactics. He'd dismantled operations like this before. The only difference now was location. Vivian Sloan wasn't running a homeowners association. She was running a low-level racketeering operation, disguised in shrub trimming and fence codes. And she'd made one critical mistake. She'd picked the wrong man to target. The next 2 weeks turned Silver Hollow into something else entirely. It was subtle at first, eerily so. A code enforcement officer appeared out of nowhere, snapping photos of Ethan's lawn. The man never introduced himself, never asked questions, just squatted by the curb, clicked a few shots of Ethan's walkway, then vanished. 2 days later, a citation arrived. Improper border vegetation encroachment, a $480 fine. Ethan stood in the middle of his yard, barefoot, holding the citation, staring at nothing. The agave plants his father had planted 30 years ago hadn't moved. The boundary lines were the same, but the HOA had begun rewriting the rules, or, rather, rewriting reality. The strangest thing was how the town reacted. His neighbors didn't just avoid him. They behaved as if he were a threat. Children were rushed inside when he stepped onto his porch. One man mumbled "outsider" under his breath as he passed by, walking his dog. It was like watching a cult in slow motion. And Ethan knew cults. He'd taken down 3 during his career. He responded the only way he knew how, like an operator. He turned his living room into a tactical nest. Maps of the neighborhood went up on the walls. Red pins marked suspicious interactions. Blue ones marked allies or potential ones. He upgraded his security cameras to thermal and night vision capable units. Drones replaced lawn decorations. And most importantly, he started listening. At 3:12 a.m. on a Tuesday, his surveillance system pinged movement. Vivian, wearing black leggings, a windbreaker, and latex gloves, she crouched by his hydrangeas with a measuring tape and cell phone. She didn't look angry. She looked focused, cold, clinical. He didn't confront her. He recorded everything. That same night, he rewired his server and sent the footage to a secure storage system off-site. One rule he never forgot: always assume your enemy has friends with keys. The next morning, he made his first move. He took a walk. At 6 a.m., just as dawn stretched across the desert sky, Ethan walked past 5 homes on his block, everyone occupied by an HOA board member. In each yard, he snapped discrete photos. Jim Claremont's backyard deck, clearly unapproved construction. Sandra Klein's mailbox, identical to his. No fine there. Vivian's fence, 2 inches too high. He logged it all. Later that afternoon, a knock at the door interrupted his notes. It was a man in his 60s, hunched, eyes cautious. "Name's Howard," he said. "Don't worry. I'm not with them." Ethan didn't speak. Howard nodded toward the house. "Your father used to fix my radio antennas. He never trusted this HOA either. They fined him for keeping hummingbird feeders." He handed Ethan an envelope. Inside, a copy of the original property covenant, the one predating the HOA's latest rewrite. "They doctored the public one," Howard whispered. "Figured you'd want the truth." Ethan looked at him. "Why now?" Howard's voice dropped. "Because they made the mistake of targeting someone who knows how to fight back." That night, Ethan stood in his dark kitchen, sipping cold black coffee, staring out across his front yard. This wasn't just a property dispute anymore. Vivian had built an empire of fear, control, and lies. And he wasn't the first she'd tried to silence. But he would be the last. Because now he had intel, leverage, and time. And if there was one thing Vivian Sloan had yet to learn about Ethan Rowe, it was this: he didn't start fights, but he never lost them. Ethan's training had taught him one truth above all: never walk into battle alone. After the visit from Howard, it was clear he wasn't the only one who had suffered under Vivian Sloan's HOA regime. But if he wanted to bring it down, he needed witnesses, proof, and most importantly, people who had something left to lose and the courage to fight for it. He started with Caleb Vaughn, a 22-year-old mechanic who used to live 2 streets over with his grandparents. Caleb had been expelled from the neighborhood after an anonymous tip claimed he was dealing drugs, completely fabricated. HOA penalties piled up. His grandparents were eventually forced to sell below market value and leave Silver Hollow behind. Ethan met him in a dusty auto shop off Route 66. The kid recognized him before he could speak. "You're the guy who told Vivian to shove her rulebook," Caleb said, wiping grease off his hands. "About damn time someone did." "I need your story," Ethan said, "and I need your help." Caleb nodded once. "You got it." Next came Marla Briggs, a local reporter for the Hollow Herald. She had once tried to expose HOA corruption until her editor was threatened with a defamation lawsuit and pulled the piece. Ethan found her nursing a coffee in a diner booth, scribbling notes on a pad labeled DOA leads. She barely glanced up. If this is about HOA whistleblowers, save your breath. I've had lawyers camped outside my apartment. I'm not here to talk, Ethan said, sliding over a USB drive. I'm here to give you what you need. The footage spoke for itself. Vivian trespassing, measuring his grass at 3 a.m., the fine pattern documents, the faked covenants. Marla's fingers twitched like someone reloading a weapon. You sure you want to go to war? She asked. Ethan stared at her. I've been at war. This is just cleaning up the neighborhood. Marla smirked. Then let's turn on the lights. With Marla and Caleb on board, Ethan's next recruit was the most surprising. Reverend Toma. The quiet, soft-spoken pastor had endured a long campaign of passive-aggressive harassment fines for holding gatherings too loud, HOA warnings for a stained glass window, deemed aesthetic disruption, and most cruelly, an order to remove the white cross planted in his front yard because it violated structural harmony. Ethan found him tending tomato vines behind the church. You're not the first person she's tried to silence, Toma said, after hearing everything. But I pray you'll be the last. I'm not here to pray, Reverend, Ethan said. I'm here to finish this. The four met in the church basement, the last place Vivian's people would suspect. They dubbed it the Hollow Four, a small strategic resistance with one goal: expose the HOA not just for rule abuse, but for organized crime. Ethan divided the work like a field op. Caleb would track maintenance workers and contractors, recording who was paid for work never completed. Marla would dig through public records, tax documents, and title transfers, flagging suspicious land sales and embezzlement. Reverend Toma would serve as their face in the community, gathering anonymous testimonies from frightened neighbors. Ethan? He'd continue collecting hard surveillance and baiting Vivian into slipping. Within 2 weeks, they had records of at least 11 homeowners forced to sell under duress. Invoices for HOA landscaping jobs billed 3 times over, one paid to a company that didn't exist. Audio of an HOA board member joking about squeezing out the non-compliant. But the biggest find came from Caleb. He followed the HOA's maintenance truck to a storage unit rented under an alias, Virginia S. Knox, Vivian's maiden name. Inside, under a cover of old chairs and yard signs, they discovered metal filing drawers with handwritten tabs. Targets, active. Compliance, indirect. Processed, closed. Each file included names, family histories, financial vulnerabilities, and pressure tactics used: fines, citations, noise complaints, and, in some cases, even credit sabotage. It wasn't an HOA anymore. It was a psychological warfare operation. And now, Ethan had proof. Vivian's web was about to collapse. But the Hollow Four knew. When you corner someone like her, she doesn't go quietly. She burns everything. Vivian Sloan felt something shifting. The whispers in her neighborhood grew louder. Fewer people returned her waves. There was hesitation in the eyes of her inner circle: Jim, Helen, Trudy. All longtime board members. She couldn't name it yet, but something was fraying in the structure she'd spent a decade perfecting. So she did what she always did when she sensed weakness. She tightened her grip. The retaliation began in waves. First came a notice of non-compliance against Reverend Toma's church for unpermitted lighting fixtures. Then, Caleb's shop was slapped with a zoning violation from the county, despite being grandfathered in since the 80s. A city inspector arrived unannounced at Marla's apartment to investigate noise complaints. They were sending a message. Vivian was flushing out the rebellion, even if she didn't yet know who was behind it. And then, she went after Ethan directly. It started with silence. No more citations. No more passive-aggressive newsletter articles. The HOA offices went quiet, too quiet. Surveillance cameras caught fewer people on the street. It was a tactic he recognized, a lull before the strike. On a rainy Thursday night, the strike came. Ethan awoke at 2:46 a.m. to the sound of shattering glass. He rolled out of bed, instinct taking over, crawling low as his house alarm blared. Downstairs, a rock wrapped in duct tape lay on the floor beneath the broken living room window. A note was attached. "Get out or you'll leave in pieces." There was no signature, just the HOA's emblem stickered to the corner like a badge of authority. Ethan reviewed the footage and found two masked individuals, one carrying a canister of gasoline. They circled his truck, sniffed around the garage, then fled after triggering his silent perimeter alert. He forwarded the video to Jessica Ramirez, his old deputy at the U.S. Marshal's office. The reply came swiftly, marking this as attempted intimidation with potential for escalation. "Need you to document everything. Don't engage unless necessary." The next day, Ethan installed a perimeter of motion-triggered LED floodlights, thermal imaging sensors, and 2 drone surveillance points. The Hollow Four doubled their activity. Caleb stopped going home. Marla changed apartments. Tama kept a baseball bat under his pulpit. Vivian, meanwhile, staged a distraction. The HOA announced a Community Improvement Fund vote, a $200 security contribution to help combat the rising threat of crime in Silver Hollow. Her speech at the town hall dripped with performative concern. "We must protect this community," she said sweetly, "from those who want to destroy it from within." She didn't name Ethan. She didn't have to. The vote passed by a narrow margin. Ethan knew why: fear. These people weren't allies or enemies. They were hostages with manicured lawns. But even fear has limits. 2 nights later, Alice Tompkins, age 79, widow, neighborhood historian, was hospitalized after falling on her porch. Her wind chimes, long a fixture, had been cut down. Her porch railing had been unscrewed. Her injuries were severe. A neighbor's door camera captured the sabotage, and the face of the person responsible. It was Trudy Baxter, HOA secretary. That was the moment Silver Hollow began to crack. When Ethan visited Alice in the hospital, she gripped his hand and whispered through oxygen tubes, "Don't let her get away with this." Vivian had made a mistake. She crossed the line from corruption to cruelty. And now, Ethan had something he didn't before: a neighborhood on edge, and witnesses finally ready to speak. The Hollow Four convened that night in the church basement. A corkboard covered in files, pins, and red string loomed behind them. At the center was Vivian's portrait, cold, calculated, now officially dangerous. "We're almost there," Ethan said. "But this won't end quietly. She'll burn the whole thing down if she thinks she's losing." Marla nodded. "So let's make sure she's holding the match when it happens." They didn't know it yet, but the next move would shatter every illusion of safety and ignite the beginning of the end. 3 days after Alice's fall, Silver Hollow no longer felt like a neighborhood. It felt like occupied territory. Ethan could feel it in the stillness. No wind chimes, no dogs barking, no kids playing outside, just neatly trimmed lawns and closed blinds. The kind of quiet that didn't come from peace, but fear. Vivian had escalated, and Ethan knew what came next. Desperation. Cornered tyrants never surrender. They lash out. And right on cue she did. It happened at 3:07 a.m. Ethan was awake, watching a thermal feed from his perimeter camera, when the alert came. Movement on the eastern edge of his property. A single figure. No mask this time. Vivian Sloan. She moved calmly, like she'd done it before, because she had. Except this time, she wasn't holding a measuring tape. She was holding a red gas can. Ethan didn't react. He didn't call out. He didn't move. He tapped his phone twice. Emergency protocol initiated. All cameras began recording. A silent drone lifted off from behind his shed. Audio picked up her whispered muttering. "This is what happens when you don't fall in line." She unscrewed the gas cap on his Ford Expedition, poured until it overflowed. Then, with surgical precision, she pulled a matchbook from her blazer, struck one, and tossed it. The explosion lit the entire street. Flames roared up into the sky. Alarms screamed. Sprinklers activated. Lights flipped on in every house around. But Vivian didn't flinch. She stood, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the fire like a queen watching a burning traitor. Then she turned and looked straight at Ethan's bedroom window, smiling. The police arrived 4 minutes later. 2 officers. Familiar faces, both of them had dismissed his previous complaints. One of them took notes with disinterest. Could have been electrical. Older models like that can spark out of nowhere. Even if it was soaked in gasoline? Ethan asked flatly. The officer's eyes narrowed. You have evidence of that? Ethan simply nodded and handed him a drive. You're going to want to back this one up twice, he said. As the fire department doused what was left of the vehicle, Vivian arrived at the edge of the scene, robe neatly tied, coffee in hand. Such a shame, she told the crowd of neighbors. These things happen when people refuse basic community security. She made sure her voice carried. She made sure they heard. The threat wasn't veiled anymore. Back inside, Ethan called his former deputy at the marshal's office, Jessica Ramirez. It's time, he said. We're past local. This is federal now. By morning, the Hollow Four became the Hollow Dozen. A surge of residents who had once cowered now came forward. Anonymous emails flooded Marla's inbox. Caleb captured footage of HOA workers dumping burned documents into a municipal dumpster, documents stamped with fake contractor names, and off-the-books cash disbursements. Reverend Toma confirmed that his church's community funds had been quietly redirected into a beautification project that only ever existed on paper. Vivian knew something had shifted. She could feel it in the way people looked at her, no longer reverent, but calculating. She called an emergency HOA meeting at the Silver Hollow Community Center, hoping to reestablish control. She shouldn't have. Ethan walked in 5 minutes after she started, flanked by 2 federal agents, a court-certified auditor, and a quiet man in a tailored suit, a forensic accountant. Vivian paused mid-sentence as they walked to the front. I believe you've made your point, Mr. Rowe, she said, her voice venomously sweet. But this is a private meeting. Actually, the lead agent said, pulling a folded document from his coat, it's now a federal investigation. Dead silence. Vivian's mouth twitched, but she didn't speak. Multiple complaints, documented financial misconduct, suspected racketeering, intimidation, mail fraud, and now arson. We have sufficient grounds for search and seizure. Caleb began filming. Marla started streaming live, and the agent added, we will also be taking immediate possession of all HOA financial records, devices, and backups. Any attempt to interfere will be treated as obstruction. Vivian tried to laugh. Oh, please, this is absurd. You're embarrassing yourselves. This man, she jabbed a finger toward Ethan, is a criminal. He's dangerous. He's undermining a lawful community structure. That's rich, Marla muttered, coming from someone who poured gas on his truck. The forensic accountant turned his laptop toward the room, displaying real-time records, kickbacks, shell corporations, duplicate HOA contracts. The room erupted into whispers, then outrage. One board member, Helen, stood up and walked out, trembling. Vivian was losing the room. But then, she did the one thing Ethan hoped she would. She snapped. This community needs control, she shrieked. Order! You think your little freedom fantasy means anything without someone keeping you in line? You think you'll survive 1 year without people like me keeping this place clean? She wasn't talking to Ethan anymore. She was talking to herself. The agents didn't wait. Ma'am, the lead said, you're under arrest. Vivian didn't resist. She simply turned, locked eyes with Ethan, and muttered, I should have buried you the moment you moved in. Ethan gave a slight nod. Yeah, he said, you really should have.